Alexander will announce that he is stepping down this morning as Republican conference chair. According to Politico, the former two-time presidential candidate has played a central role in shaping GOP strategy during President Barack Obama's time in office. He'll be making that announcement again this morning. Now to live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal Lord God, we believe that you will never fail or forsake us, but help us to never take your love and faithfulness for granted. Empower our senators to be good stewards of the many blessings and of the responsibilities and opportunities you have given them. Lord, open their minds and give them a vision of the unlimited possibilities available to those who trust you as their guide. Incline their ears to hear your voice and fill them with your power, O Lord of hosts. You are the King eternal, immortal, invisible, who alone is wise. You deserve the honor and glory forever and ever. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., September 20, 2011. To the Senate. On the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Jeanne Shaheen, a senator from the state of New Hampshire, to perform the duties of the chair. Son Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Madam President.
The Majority Leader.
Following the leader remarks, the Senate will be in morning business for an hour. The Republicans will control the first half, and the majority will control the final half. Following that morning business, the Senate will be in consideration of H.R. 2832, which is the Generalized System of Preference Act. That is a vehicle for trade adjustment assistance that we're going to be working on. We're going to recess today from 12:30 to 2:15 for our weekly caucus meetings. At 2:30 today, Senator Heller will be recognized to deliver his maiden speech in the Senate. We'll work through amendments to trade adjustment assistance and notify senators when votes are scheduled. Madam President, I see on the floor today my friend Lamar Alexander from this great state of Tennessee. And I just received a news flash that he was going to relinquish his leadership position and stay in the Senate and run for re-election. I don't know all the reasons for his doing this, but I want the record to be spread with the fact that I have found Lamar Alexander to be one of the most thoughtful people I've ever served with in the Senate. There are many issues that he gets no credit for that were resolved because of his ability to see the big picture. We had this really big issue dealing with the so-called nuclear option as to what would happen to the Senate with some of our rules changes, and he stepped in completely out of the limelight, and because of his idea, we resolved that issue. And there are many, many other examples just like that. He's a unique person in this body. He accomplishes a great deal and gets credit for not a lot, and that's unfortunate, but that's who he is and that's who he's always been. So I know that he will continue being a stalwart in the Senate. I look forward to his working with him, but I look forward mostly to his sense of fairness, which he has been so very, very exemplary in during my time with him in the Senate. Mr. President, 60 years ago, this nation's armed forces were segregated by race. 35 years ago, women weren't allowed to attend our nation's military academies. And until today, in fact, last night at midnight, thousands and thousands of qualified, dedicated men and women were barred from military service or expelled from the armed forces because they were honest about their sexual orientation. Today, I'm glad to say that the time has passed when Americans willing to give their lives to defend this great nation could be turned away from service because of whom they loved. Today, don't ask, don't tell is no longer the law of the land. For 17 years, we've asked our soldiers to defend a flag that stands for liberty and justice for all, and then required some of those soldiers to keep who they really were a secret. And in too many cases, we've robbed them of the right to fight for their country altogether. Madam President, listen to this staggering number. More than 13,000 American service members have been discharged because of this law. That law's been in effect just a short period of time, but more than 13,000 have been discharged because of this law, which institutionalized discrimination against openly gay soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen. And I say openly gay. This really wasn't the case. Some were suspect. There was a long interview on the public broadcasting this morning about a woman who was discharged at age 22 for someone reporting that they had seen her in a bar with another woman. We'll never know how many people, that is, capable men and women, were never offered patriotic service. They couldn't, because the law exposed them to career-ruining discrimination. So we have the 13,000 plus thousands of others who said, no need to do this because I'll have to live a lie. The military's highest commanders and the vast majority of service members agree our fighting force is better off knowing that we'll have the best and brightest volunteers, regardless of sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, religion, or gender. There's no place for intolerance in our great nation, and certainly not in the armed forces, tasked with protecting it. So I'm happy to say that today our military policies and our national values are in line. From today forward, no qualified man or woman willing to fight for a nation founded on the principle of tolerance and equality will ever again be denied the right to do so. Madam President, on Wednesday, the House, we're told, will send us a continuing resolution to fund the government through November 18th. I was disappointed to see the House shortchanged the Federal Emergency Management Agency that we've been told specifically what they intend to do, and it is a real shortchange by failing to provide the funding to adequately help Americans whose lives have been devastated by floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes. Madam President, it's staggering to understand the depth of the concern that people have. Yesterday morning, I received a call from Kent Conrad, a senator from North Dakota, who proceeded to explain to me about a city in North Dakota by the name of Minot, North Dakota, a town of about 40,000 people. 25% of the homes in Minot, North Dakota are underwater. Most of those underwater are ruined forever. These are not big mansions. They're homes that people have lived in, sometimes for a very long period of time. Yesterday, I was speaking to Senator Hoeven, who certainly knows North Dakota as well as anyone, served as governor there, now in the Senate, and we were talking about the flood. And of course, one of the things people are saying, well, why didn't Congress and the President plan for all this? Well, as Senator Hoeven described in some detail, how do you estimate something that has never, ever, ever happened before? Not a 50-year flood took place in North Dakota. Not a 100-year flood. Not a 500-year flood. It's something that has never, ever happened, ever. And this in spite of the fact that they've built some dams, even some in Canada to stop the flooding. It didn't matter. This was so immense and never had happened before that this in North Dakota, sparsely populated state, has been devastated by these unnatural, you say, but certainly unusual floods who have ravaged that state. But that's not the only state. Many states have been hammered hard. Who would ever have thought a year ago that a relatively small community, Joplin, Missouri, would be hit by almost 300-mile-an-hour winds? And the winds didn't just whip through. They roiled around there for such a time that basically destroyed that town. There are many other examples of what has happened with being unable to determine what would happen in the future. Suffice it to say, we provided funds last week here in the Senate to help Americans whose lives have been devastated by floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes, and other natural calamities. We passed a bipartisan bill granting FEMA and other agencies that help that disaster victims need an additional $6.9 billion. That's probably not enough. Frankly, Madam President, after the Appropriations Committee did their work, reported a bill out of some $6 billion, I asked the different subcommittees to find out what additionally was needed. They came back with another $3 billion. We pared that down because we wanted to keep within the agreement that we had in the Deficit Reduction Act, which set that at $7 billion, and we're slightly under that. That's why we came in with that figure. That funding, the $6.9 billion, while it doesn't give everyone everything, it will help rebuild after several costly natural disasters, not the least of which is Hurricane Irene. Tomorrow, when the Senate receives the House bill to fund the government for 6 more weeks, we'll amend it with the language that the Senate passed, the Senate FEMA legislation. This year, President Obama has declared disasters in all but 2 states, and FEMA is quickly running out of money to help American families and communities recover. I talked to Mr. Fugate, the head of FEMA, last Thursday, and he said they have enough money to last probably until the 25th of September. Now, that's even on a very, very narrow plane that they're working on. They've stopped the work in Joplin, Missouri. They've stopped the work because of devastation that happened in the Gulf previously. The only money that they're spending now deals with Tropical Storm Lee and Hurricane Irene. They have no more money. They're out of money. So it's desperate. I know that this amendment will enjoy the support of my Republican colleagues as it did just last week. We had 10 that stepped forward, and it was very important that they did that. That last week, a group of bipartisan senators agreed that helping communities destroyed by natural disasters was too important to let politics get in the way. Americans have sent a message, Madam President, to Congress that no issue is more important to them than jobs. But for Republicans, job creation is less important than slashing spending on initiatives that create jobs and the Social Security and Medicare benefits seniors have earned. Democrats believe we can reduce the deficit without abandoning job creation. We can make smart, strategic cuts that won't further slow down our struggling economy while protecting and advancing initiatives that create jobs. That's why President Obama has released detailed proposals to create 2 million jobs now while reducing our deficit by more than $4 trillion over the next decade. But many Republicans have criticized both proposals even before looking at their substance. It seems that they're more concerned with protecting millionaires, billionaires, hedge fund managers, and private jet owners than fighting for the middle class. They claim it's class warfare to ask the wealthiest 400 Americans Madam President, the wealthiest 400 Americans who made an average, these 400, of $271 million each, to pay the same tax rate as librarians, police officers, air traffic controllers, and others, secretaries, like Mr. Buffett talked about. The truth is Republicans are just defending the economic policies that have besieged the middle class for years. It's class warfare to ask middle-class Americans to get by on less, while those same 400 Americans are paying less than 18% for their income in taxes, a lower rate than secretaries and janitors who work for them. So let me explain this as well as I can. We will do whatever it takes to protect the middle class and seniors, even if it means the richest of the rich in America have to contribute a little bit more than they do now. We'll fight for the policies that create American jobs, even if that means CEOs and hedge fund managers making hundreds of millions of dollars every year have to contribute the same amount or more as teachers and firefighters whose salaries are a fraction the size of theirs. It's fairness, simple fairness. With 14 million Americans out of work, we have 14 million reasons to put job creation ahead of tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires. As the economist and former Labor Secretary Robert Wright said, and I quote, "True patriotism isn't cheap. It's about taking on a fair share of the burden of keeping America going." End of quote.
Madam President.
The Republican leader.
Everyone knows the top issue on the minds of most Americans right now is jobs. And what I've said is that one thing we could all do right now to help spur job creation is to pass the 3 free trade agreements with Panama, Colombia, and South Korea. Republicans in Congress have been urging the President to pass these agreements for nearly 3 years, and yet they've languished on his desk for no good reason. It's time to send them up so we can act. At a moment when 14 million Americans are looking for work, it's indefensible for the White House to demand a vote on trade adjustment assistance as a condition for action. Still, I and others have agreed to allow it so we can finally move ahead on these vital trade deals. And it's my expectation, based on the understanding that I have with the administration, that the President will stop dragging his feet soon and submit all 3 of them for quick approval. At long last, U.S. businesses that want to expand here at home, but which have been held back by the President's refusal to act, will be able to compete on a level playing field in these markets. And will create jobs in the process. But these agreements, while helpful, are not enough. In order to create the kind of jobs we need more trade deals than these 3. And that's why I've been a strong advocate for granting this President the same trade promotion authority that every other president has enjoyed since 1974. Also known as Fast Track, TPA creates expedited procedures for congressional consideration of trade agreements that the administration negotiates with our trading partners. TPA has long had bipartisan support and led to numerous trade agreements with 17 new countries during the Bush administration, including the 3 we hope to consider shortly. Unfortunately, Democrats and their union allies allowed TPA to expire in 2007. And this President has made no effort whatsoever to revive it. Without TPA, the U.S. will likely never agree to another deal. The unions will make sure of it. And we've seen what happens then. After the North American Free Trade Agreement passed in 1993, TPA expired. In the 8 years that followed, the U.S. did nothing while other countries moved ahead, integrating themselves in the global economy. We can't let that happen again. We can't miss more opportunities to compete in foreign markets with U.S.-made products just because unions don't want to. Consider this. While our trade agenda has lapsed, the European Union is negotiating 16 trade agreements with 46 countries, according to the Business Roundtable. Japan is negotiating 7 agreements with 38 countries, and even China is negotiating 11 agreements with 18 countries. Well, what about the U.S.? Well, we've signed none since his administration began, and we're actively negotiating only one, a pact that will open opportunities to American businesses and workers across the Pacific Rim. But I and many of my colleagues and many of our allies overseas want to know what is the President's plan to enact that one deal if he doesn't ask for, hasn't received, and doesn't even seem to want trade promotion authority. Is he ready to watch all these opportunities vanish? We can't allow these opportunities for American jobs to simply drift away. We must reauthorize TPA along with TAA. TPA and TAA have moved together historically. In 1974, when TPA was created, in 1988, when it was reauthorized, and again in 2002, when TAA was expanded to its current pre-stimulus levels. And that's why I'm offering an amendment that will grant this President trade promotion authority through 2013, the same term that the Democrats are insisting we reauthorize trade adjustment assistance. My amendment builds into the same accountability to Congress and the need to consult with Congress that previous TPAs have had. On legislation offered by a bipartisan pair of trade leaders, Senator Portman and Senator Lieberman. Now, you're going to hear Democrats arguing that we haven't had enough time to carefully consider this expansion of trade promotion authority and work on the negotiating objectives we generally include in the bill. So I would remind them that I first called for TPA last May. Since that time, I've heard nothing from my Democratic colleagues or the White House about their interest in renewing this authority. There's been zero outreach, and when I suggested I'd even be willing to support an extension of TAA if we could reauthorize TPA, there was nothing. So in my view, if the White House won't show leadership on this issue, if they're too worried about owning other free trade agreements, or as being seen by some of their allies as promoting them too aggressively, it's my view that we ought to help them get there. And that's why I'm offering this amendment today, to show the world that some in Congress are ready to move forward and lower the barriers that keep American goods out of foreign countries and which American consumers all benefit from our integration into the world economy. With 14 million Americans out of work and thousands of Americans looking for opportunities to sell American-made goods around the world, we can't afford to wait like we did on these 3 free trade agreements while the administration makes up its mind that American jobs are more important than appeasing their union allies. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the 2 leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first half and the majority controlling the final half.
Madam President.
The Senator from Tennessee.
Madam President, I thank my friend of 40 years, the Republican leader, for being here for these remarks I'm about to make. And I thank my colleague, Senator Corker, and several other of my Republican colleagues for, on very short notice, coming to the Senate floor for these brief remarks. Madam President, next January, following the annual retreat of Republican senators, I will step down from the Senate Republican leadership. My colleagues have elected me as Republican Conference Chairman 3 times, and I will have completed 4 years, or the equivalent of 2 two-year terms at that time. My reason for doing that is this. Stepping down from the Republican leadership will liberate me to spend more time trying to work for results on issues that I care the most about. That means stopping runaway regulations, runaway spending, but it also means confronting the timidity that allows us to, that allows health care spending to squeeze out support for roads, support for research, support for scholarships and other government functions that make it easier and cheaper to create private sector jobs. I want to do more to make the Senate a more effective place to address serious issues. For 4 years in our caucus, my leadership job has been this: to help the leader succeed, to help individual Republicans succeed, to look for a consensus within our caucus, and to suggest a message. I have enjoyed that, but there are different ways to offer leadership in the United States Senate. And I've concluded that after 9 years that this is now the best way for me to make a contribution. It really boils down to this: serving in this body, as each one of us knows, is a rare privilege. I'm trying to make the best use of that time while I'm here. For the same reason I plan to step down in January from the leadership, I will not be a candidate for the leadership in the next Congress. But I do intend to be more, not less, in the thick of resolving issues, and I do plan to run for re-election to the United States Senate in 2014. These are serious times. Every American's job is on the line. The United States still produces about 23% of the world's wealth, even though we only have about 5% of the world's people. But all around the world, people are realizing that there's nothing different about their brains and our brains, and they're using their brain power to try to achieve some of the same kind of standard of living that we've enjoyed here. As a result of this, some have predicted that within a decade, for the first time since the 1870s, the United States will not be the world's largest economy. They say China will be. My goal is to help keep the United States of America the world's strongest economy. Now, Madam President, there are two other matters that are relevant to the decision that I'm making today that I'd like to address. The first is this: when I first ran for the United States Senate in 2002, I said to the people of Tennessee, and they weren't surprised by this, that I will serve with conservative principles and an independent attitude. I intend to continue to serve in the very same way. I'm a very Republican. I grew up in the mountains of Tennessee and still live there in a congressional district that's never elected a Democrat to Congress since Abraham Lincoln was President of the United States. My great-grandfather was once asked his politics, and he said, "I'm a Republican. I fought for the Union, and I vote like I shot." I've been nominated 5 times by Tennessee Republicans to serve in public office. I've been elected 3 times by Senate Republicans as conference chairman. If I could get a 100% Republican solution of any of our legislative issues, I would do it in a minute. But I know that the Senate usually requires 60 votes for a solution on serious issues, and we simply can't get that with only Republican votes or only Democratic votes. Second, by stepping down from the leadership, I expect to be more, not less, aggressive on the issues. And I look forward to that. I mean, the Senate is created to be the place where the biggest issues producing the biggest disagreements are argued out. And I don't buy for 1 minute that these disagreements create some sort of unhealthy lack of civility in the United States Senate. I think those who believe that the debates today in our Senate are more fractious than the debates in our political history simply have forgotten American history. They've forgotten what Adams and Jefferson said of one another. They've forgotten that Vice President Burr killed former Secretary of Treasury Alexander Hamilton. They've forgotten that Congressman Houston was walking down the streets of Washington one day, came across a congressman from Ohio who had opposed Andrew Jackson's Indian policy and started caning him, for which he was censured. They've forgotten that there was a South Carolina congressman who came over here to the floor of the Senate and nearly killed by hitting him with a stick a senator from Massachusetts. And they've forgotten that another senator from Massachusetts named Henry Cabot Lodge stood on the floor of the Senate and said of the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, "I hate that man." I mean, they forgot about Henry Clay's compromises and the debates that were held during the Army McCarthy days. And what of the Watergate debates? And what of the Vietnam debates? So the main difference today between the debates in Washington and the debates in history are that today, because we have so much media, everybody hears everything instantly. If you would notice, most of the people who are shouting at each other on television or radio or the internet have never been elected to anything. It would help if we in the Senate knew each other better across party lines. But to suggest that we should be more timid in debating the biggest issues before the American people would ignore the function of the Senate and would ignore our history. Truth is that United States senators debate divisive issues with excessive civility. So, Madam President, I've enjoyed my 4 years in the Republican leadership. I thank my colleagues for that privilege. I now look forward to spending more time working with all senators to achieve results on the issues that I care about the most, issues that I believe will determine for our next generation what kind of economy we will have, what our standard of living will be for our families, and what our national security will be. I thank the President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Republican leader.
Madam President, I'd say to my friend of 40 years, even though there are a number of colleagues here on the floor, I'm confident we all agree this is not a eulogy that we're about to engage in. But really, I think I have a great sense of relief that my friend is going to run again in 2014 and continue to make an extraordinary contribution to the Senate and to America. When I first met Lamar, he was at the White House. I had just come here as a legislative assistant to a newly elected senator. He had already accomplished a lot. He'd been elected to Phi Beta Kappa at Vanderbilt, graduated from New York University Law School, had clerked for a well-known circuit judge, been involved in Howard Baker's first campaign, had helped him set up his first office, and that was before I met him. Since I've met him, as many of you are already aware, it's hard to think of anybody who's done more things well. He went home in 1970 and ran a successful campaign for I think the first Republican governor Tennessee had elected, certainly since the Civil War. Ran for governor himself in a very bad year in 1974. Didn't work out too well. But one of the things we know about our colleague Lamar is he's pretty persistent, so he tried it again in 78. Elected governor, re-elected governor in 82, spectacular record. And then he did a very unusual thing, and I remember knowing about it at the time. I kept up with him since we had met years before when we were in Washington. He took his entire family and went to Australia for 6 months, put the kids in school there, and actually wrote a book called 6 Months Off, which I read then. Now, I don't know how many books you sold, how many books Senator Alexander sold, but it was a fascinating review of basically just taking a break, going somewhere else, doing something entirely new before getting back on the career treadmill that we, of course, knew he would get back on. And so once the Australian experience was over, this extraordinarily accomplished and diverse individual became president of the University of Tennessee. That was back when they used to play football. And then President Bush 41 asked him to become Secretary of Education. So he was a cabinet member. And oh, by the way, I think I left out that at his mother's insistence, he became quite proficient at piano. He's a fabulous piano player and musician. My mother let me quit. That was the only mistake she made in an otherwise perfect job of raising me. But your mother, by insisting that you continued to take piano, gave him that dimension as well. So here we've got a guy who's been governor, president of his university, a member of the cabinet, and if that were not enough, he went into the private sector and started an extraordinarily successful business, which did very well. And so I expect that our colleague from Tennessee thought that his public career was over, but then Fred Thompson decided he wanted to go do something else, and all of a sudden he was in the United States Senate. not just in the Senate, but then becomes a leader in the Senate in a very short period of time. And we've had an opportunity to get to know our colleague. It's hard to think of anybody more intelligent, more accomplished, and also more likable than Lamar Alexander. And so I must say to my good friend from Tennessee, I'm relieved that you are not leaving the Senate. This is not a eulogy, but it is an opportunity, I think, for those of us who've known and admired you for a long time to just recount your extraordinary accomplishment during a lifetime of public service. And so it's been my honor to be your friend, and I'm going to continue to be your friend, and I'm glad you continue to be our colleague. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President, I thank the Republican leader. I'm deeply grateful for his comments with one single exception. I have great confidence in Derek Dooley. He's a fine football coach at the University of Tennessee. They're playing very good football, and I intend to be in my usual seats at the Georgia game in 2 weeks.
Madam President.
The other senator from Tennessee.
Madam President, thank you. I want to say to my colleague, I certainly enjoyed your comments today, and I'm excited for you. I sit very close to you here in the Senate, and I'm with you a great deal. I do plan on keeping a cane out of your reach for a few days. But I very much appreciate your service and leadership of the Republican Party here in the United States Senate. And I think that what you've done in that position is to bring out the best in all of us in the best way that you can. I'm excited for you. And I look at this as a great day for the Senate, for the United States Senate. It's a great day for our country. This is a great day for the state of Tennessee. And I can tell you, based on the conversations that we've had and the way that I know you, the United States Senate is going to become very quickly a more interesting place to serve. And for all of us who have been concerned about our lack of ability to solve our nation's greatest problems, I look at what you've done today as a step in the direction towards us being able, as a body, to more responsibly deal with the pressing issues that you outlined in your talk. So I thank you for having the courage to step down from a position that many Republican senators would love to have. I thank you for the way that you serve our country. I thank you for the example that you have been to so many in your public service in our state, in our country, and I thank you for being my friend. Thank you, sir.
Madam President.
Senator from North Carolina.
Madam President, I rise today to echo the comments of colleagues earlier about the contribution of Lamar Alexander, a friend, colleague, but somebody who has had an impact not just on the state of Tennessee, but on the United States of America. And I think one of the toughest things that a member of the Congress can do is to, one, step down from leadership, or two, voluntarily leave the body. And I think it says more about Lamar Alexander than any comments that can be made, that he understands where he's going. And I think he stated it very well. His contribution on the future of this country is what he's most concerned with. And that's why this country is blessed to have leaders like that. We welcome him back in the ranks of the normal, the general population of what has been the asylum of late, and I hope that Lamar will be a great influence on our ability to get the body of deliberative debate and participation back, and that's certainly his quest. One of his passions, though, is education, and I was shocked that he didn't mention that in his litany of areas that he would delve into. But I know earlier last week, he and I and others introduced 5 reforms to K-12 education. And when we talk about the future, whether it's Senator Alexander or myself or others, we say that the future of this country is really conditional upon how well we educate the next generation. That we make sure that the next generation has the foundational knowledge that they need to compete in a 21st century economy. I think it's safe to say today that our record is not good. Just 70% of our high school seniors graduate on time. Let me say that again. 70% of our high school seniors will graduate on time. Many of those will never go back. They won't cross the goal line. And in today's economy, the likelihood of being invited for a job interview is slim to zero. You see, we've got federal laws that require an employer to accept an application from whoever walks in the door. But when it gets down to the interview process, I can assure you employers, when they look at that resume and it doesn't have high school graduation on it, will certainly invite the others that at least have that threshold of education, if not further degrees. So I think we owe it to the next generation to be candid with them and tell them this is a minimum to have an opportunity for unlimited success. If we ever get to a point that this is not about an opportunity of unlimited success, America will have changed greatly. And I think that's one of the passions that Senator Alexander has. It's why he's so involved in issues like education, and he's willing to sacrifice leadership for greater involvement in the policies. In those bills that were introduced last week, there were 2 that Lamar and I did together. And let me just share with my colleagues what those bills do. Today, we have 97 authorized programs. 59 of them are funded, and they're all funded individually. That means that we make available money to a state and consequently to a school district. But their requirement is to access that money, they have to do exactly what we structured in the program. Many schools don't need that program, and they forego that money. And yet, on the Senate floor, we've debated frequently the need to get more resources into, especially at-risk school districts, to bolster that foundational education. What we simply do is we leave Title I alone. It's targeted at a specific population. But we take all these other 59 programs that last year were funded, and we melt them into 2 pots of money. One pot is designed for improvement in teaching and learning. The other pot is designed for safe and healthy student block grants. And you might say, well, what if a school system doesn't need a fund for improvement of teaching and learning, but they do need more money for safe and healthy students? We allow 100% transferability between those two areas. So if a school system purely needs teaching and learning and they want to focus all of that, they can take that safe and healthy student block grant money and they can put it over into teaching and learning. By the same token, for school systems that might not see the benefits there, but they have a growing Title I population, we allow 100% transferability up to the Title I program. What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to do what school systems have told us year after year, decade after decade. Give us more flexibility. Let us decide what it is we need for our students to learn. This is not about input, this is about output. This is about focusing on how we improve education to where every child crosses that goal line of success. That then the foundational knowledge base is so great that they're marketable in whatever direction our economy decides to go. Now, the challenging thing for us, a lot like what Senator Alexander did today, he gave up power, a position in leadership. It means the Congress has to give up the power of deciding exactly how every school system is going to implement programs. You see, we've got to be big enough to realize that the one-size-fits-all structure from Washington doesn't work. That every school system in America is a little bit unique. And, yeah, we recognize the fact that not every state is necessarily the best fiduciary of the funds. This legislation only requires the states to siphon off 1.5% of the money. We're not going to build a palace or create a bureaucracy in state capitals in education off of these programs anymore. The intent is to take this money and put it into the classroom. Make sure that the skills of the teacher are better. Make sure that, in fact, we're teaching teachers the right way to teach today. I know we're not allowed to have electronics on the Senate floor. We hide them in our pockets real well. Kids aren't allowed to have electronics in school. They hide them in their pocket real well. And when we all leave where it's prohibitive, this is the first thing we pull out of our pocket. We check our messages, we check sports scores, we check the news. Some of us old people make phone calls, but we've got a generation that does nothing but text. You see, they're different than I am. I'm a little bit different than Lamar. And every generation is going to be different. But walk in a classroom today and the first thing that a teacher says is open your book to page 44. Yet in between the covers of a book, we've got a generation that have never delved into it. They've gone between the covers of their iPad, their Kindle, their PDA in their pocket. They read books, they play games. They do it in a different way. It's time for us to recognize the fact that they learn differently because they communicate differently. Our ability is to take somebody my age who still has a passion for the classroom and to change the way that they teach through how we take them through continuous education. You see, effectiveness is in part connecting with the people that you're trying to teach. And if we do that in the right way, we're going to be successful. I'm not trying to create the model in Washington and to say to the states and localities, here's the only way you can do it. We're trying to give them the flexibility of the money and let them design the programs that they think will work. Again, with that, though, it requires us to let go of that power of accountability. There's no reason for Washington to be accountable for every K through 12 system in this country. We can be a partner, and I think the appropriate role is a financial partner, but from accountability, I don't want to be in Washington determining whether a school is a pass or a fail, or whether a teacher is highly qualified or not. At best, it's arbitrary that we would come up with something. What I want to do is I want to empower communities. I want to empower parents. I want to empower the business community to say, you determine success and failure. I want to empower principals and administrators. You determine whether teachers are qualified or not. I don't want to sit in Washington and define that a pharmacist who's lost their passion to work in a drugstore can't shift over and become a chemistry teacher in a high school because I've determined they're not qualified to do it. Yet day in and day out, I would go into the pharmacy and I would allow them to compound drugs for me, but they can't go in a classroom and explain to kids how that works, or more importantly, how the interaction of compounds actually happens. That's not my role. It's not our role. Our role is to encourage by making sure that the tools are there for those closest to the problem to come up with solutions. Well, what we did last week was a minor step in the right direction. And I hope my colleagues will look at the legislation and will entertain co-sponsoring it. I hope that the Secretary of Education will look at it, even though we've had conversations that continued since the first of the year, and we've got a ranking member and a chairman engaged in the reauthorization of elementary and secondary education right now. And I hope we influence their ability to get some type of an agreement. But I think it's also important to understand that within the context of this are things that all of us know works. Let me give you a couple of examples. Senator Kirk introduced a bill on expansion of charter schools. Now, why is that important? It's not important because we just simply want to create competition with the public model. Charter schools have become an incubator of new ideas, of new ways to teach. In Houston, Texas, some former Teach for America students created KIPP Academy and immediately had such success that they exported KIPP Academy to New York. And their intent was to go from New York to Atlanta. And somehow they happened to stop in Northampton County, North Carolina, in a little town called Gaston. It is in the middle of nowhere, but like all of North Carolina, it's beautiful. Its students are at risk. There's no economic driver in that county. But for some reason, KIPP stopped there and created a school. And now we've taken underperforming students, and through KIPP, all of them excel. I can take you to Charlotte, North Carolina, where KIPP finally found a home and was located next door to the elementary school. There's no way anybody can claim that they draw from a different population. They draw from the same school neighborhood. Yet, if you compare KIPP to the traditional elementary school next door, the performance of those students is off the chart. At some point, you have to look at it and say, this model works, how do we replicate it? But we're hung up with one's public and one's charter. Well, let me tell you, if we could replicate all of them to be KIPP, I couldn't care what we call them, and I would care less about how we funded them. I would only care about what the outcome is, how many students have the education foundation that we need. And in KIPP's case, it's almost 100%. Now, one of the big components of KIPP is the fact that they plug in to Teach for America graduates. Teachers who enter the system knowing that for a period of time, their agreement is they're going into at-risk areas. They're going in dealing with students that somebody has deemed hard to complete the process. They go in with a different passion. They don't go in surprised with the makeup of the students in their classroom on the first day. They go in expecting this job to be tough, knowing that their creativity and their innovation is going to be challenged. And what we found so far is that for those Teach for America graduates, they end up staying longer than, in fact, the contractual period of time. They find that it's much easier, but also much more satisfying to take the most at risk and to make sure that they have that education foundation that's needed. That's incorporated in these bills. It's not just left to a simple line item that, in this particular case, I think has been zeroed out in the President's budget. But it can be incorporated into this where we can not only fund, we can expand Teach for America. With Senator Kirk's bill, we can expand what KIPP's doing. We can challenge other individuals in other areas of the country to create KIPP-like models that work. Madam President, my challenge today is to assure all members of the United States Senate and all Americans, our kids deserve us to try. Now, we've been dictating from Washington for decades, and we continue to see 30+% of our kids not reach that goal line. And if they do it in a way that's not necessarily advantageous to their future. If we want our country to continue to prosper, if we want to continue to be the innovator of the world, then we've got to create a pool, a generation of kids where 100% of them are prepared to compete. I think that's exactly why Senator Alexander stated he was willing to give up the reign of leadership to be more intricately involved in the solutions that are crafted on this floor and in this Congress. And that's why I said earlier, America is benefited because we've got people like Lamar Alexander here. I'm convinced that over the next several months, the reauthorization of elementary secondary education will be front and center. I can only ask my colleagues that they spend the time looking at some of the suggestions that are on the table already. Authorship means nothing to me. It's outcome. Change the bill in a way that still stays within this framework, I'll be a co-sponsor of anything. Start to make Washington more dominant in the control of how the money's used or what the programs look like. I've been there. We've tried that. Not only does it not work, educators have told us that it is increasingly more frustrating for them and they'll drop out of the system. We've got to create a system that's a magnet for talent, a magnet for people that are passionate like Lamar Alexander, something that gives us hope in the future that our kids have a better chance of succeeding than they have over the past few decades. I think the bill Empowering Local Educational Decision-Making Act of 2011 is a start. And I think the next generation is worth the investment of time on the part of our members to look at this legislation and to get behind it. I thank the President. I yield the floor. I suggest the absence